The human body becomes confused when the light doesn't rest. Eyes dry out. Thoughts become tangled. The hands of the clock lose their meaning. Time, once measured in cycles of light and darkness, becomes just a fragile concept, controlled by alarm clocks and thick curtains. And in this place where the sun never sets, routine no longer follows the same rules as anywhere else in the world. People try to live normally, but it's as if the sky itself is always awake, always watching, always reminding that here, rest is not a choice. It is a daily battle against a light that doesn't know how to stop. The streets have movement and hours that make no sense. Children ride their bikes at midnight, while adults drink coffee at 3 in the afternoon under the same sun from 10 in the morning. Businesses try to maintain a routine, but the most adapted stores are those that open when residents feel they should, not when the clock says so. The elderly say it's possible to get used to it, but the body silently disagrees. And even when it's not spoken about, everyone carries the same sign in their eyes, a slight fatigue disguised by trained smiles. The city's architecture also responds to the unrelenting sun. Windows are double-paned with thermal insulation. Curtains aren't decorative, they're shields. Almost every home has darkened rooms designed to simulate night, with soft red lights and acoustic insulation. Domestic life is divided between what is exposed to the sun and what is protected from it. Homes have become fortresses against constant brightness, and many residents decorate their homes with images of the moon as a symbolic way of remembering that darkness still exists somewhere. Mental health became a public issue. Local psychologists don't just treat common traumas or anxieties, but a kind of chronobiological mismatch. Constant light affects hormones, sleep, the perception of time passing. And it reflects in everything. Marriages end without apparent reason. Children have hyperactivity episodes. Teenagers fall into early existential crises. Dreams become blurry. Rest becomes an artificial invention. And even so, the city insists on continuing as if everything were normal. Schools teach time as if it still obeyed darkness. But students look out the window and see the sun mocking the theory. Teachers try to create a sense of routine, but they know they're competing against something greater. Some young people write journals with pages numbered by sensations. Today, the sun seemed quieter. Today I felt like it was dawn. Today I wanted to sleep and the sky wouldn't let me. And in those silent records, the city reveals itself, a place where the daily struggle is against the clock of a sky that refuses to turn. Tourism takes advantage of the curiosity of those who've never lived there. Outsiders arrive enchanted by the promise of an eternal place of light, but few last more than a few weeks. Hotels offer night rooms, massages to reprogram the body, and meals at reversed hours. But the charm fades quickly. What seemed magical turns into discomfort. And when tourists leave, residents return to their slow and resilient pace, already understanding that living under an endless sun demands more than will. It demands constant adaptation. Dreams change in this place. No one longs for fame or fortune as a priority. The greatest shared wish, spoken only in silence, is simple: to sleep in peace. Many spend fortunes on sleep induction techniques, technological mattresses, natural pills, rain sounds, and apps with countdowns to trick the body into thinking it's night. Some even paint their ceilings black with glowing stars, trying to simulate the sky that never comes. Because in this corner of the world, closing your eyes is an act of resistance, and opening them may mean never truly resting again. If you've made it this far, you might be able to feel a bit of the weight of this light that never hides. Imagine living months without the comforting pause of darkness, without the soft mystery of night, without the silent embrace of the stars. Imagine growing up thinking the sky is just a giant incandescent ceiling, never knowing the chill of dawn, the sound of crickets, the smell of the earth after a nighttime rain. What looks beautiful to outsiders from the inside can be exhausting. And understanding that is the first step to seeing these lives as they really are, full of disguised courage. The local economy was shaped to survive this strange time. Many activities operate on alternating hours. Some factories run 24-hour shifts, never stopping, using natural light as psychological fuel. Others close for long periods to respect workers' cycles. The concept of business hours became a vague reference. The clock is no longer a tool of control. It's a reminder that the human body still tries to follow a rhythm the sky has already forgotten. School calendars are adapted. Vacations don't follow summer or winter, but the period of greatest biological confusion. Families plan everything based on exhaustion level, not on seasons. Some children grow up never knowing what a full night's sleep feels like. Others develop a poetic sensitivity to time, writing about the beauty of seeing the world always lit. What is trauma for some becomes art for others. Because in this place, normal is no longer the same, the elderly suffer the most. Many report memory lapses, confusion between days and weeks, difficulty holding long conversations. Some develop early signs of dementia, worsened by the natural deprivation of darkness. But they're also the ones who most respect the tradition of silence and retreat. They are the ones who remind the young of the importance of creating their own night rituals, even if the sky refuses to cooperate. In those rituals lies the community's emotional survival. Artificial light commerce exists, but darkness became a luxury product. Restaurants offer dinners in completely dark environments, where dishes are served without the customer seeing what they're eating. The goal is not only gastronomic, it's psychological, to feel the unknown, to relearn silence, to remember what the body forgot. And in those small moments of manufactured darkness, many rediscover something precious, the inner peace that constant light threatens to erase. Labor laws also had to be revised. There are shift limits not just by hours, but by exposure to light. Some companies offer dark rest as a benefit. And unions fight for breaks that respect the circadian cycle, even if that cycle must be simulated. The government created a special ministry to study the effects of this endless brightness. But the most repeated conclusion in the reports is simple. No one was born to live without night. Parties are quiet. Public celebrations avoid artificial lights since there is already too much light. Fireworks are banned during some parts of the year as they confuse animals and further disorient residents. Celebrations take place in dark homes with candles and soft songs. People learn to celebrate without noise, without excess. Because here, even joy needs to be balanced so it doesn't harm the already fragile sense of time. Some local artists created their own aesthetic. They paint with shadow tones, write about what isn't seen, compose music in slow tempos, as if time had been stretched. It's a silent, dense art, but deeply beautiful. Because it is born from weariness. And weariness, when it doesn't explode, transforms into poetry. There are urban legends about people who went mad from not seeing darkness. Stories of individuals who walked off into nothing, saying they were searching for night. Some were found in caves, others disappeared into the sea. These are whispered tales among residents, symbolic warnings. Respect your limits. Create your night. Even if the sky doesn't offer one. Eating habits also change. The body needs adjustments. Some diets are designed to balance hormone production affected by prolonged light exposure. Vitamins, melatonin, sleep-inducing foods, all are part of the medical routine. Some schools serve dinner at breakfast time as part of a biological re-education program. And between confusion and adaptation, the city keeps going. Marriages face unique challenges. Couples argue over trivial matters that elsewhere would be solved with a good night's sleep. But here, night must be invented. Many relationships end due to emotional fatigue. Others survive because they've learned to create symbolic shadows. sleeping together to forest sounds, using sleep masks, setting quiet moments even with sunlight flooding the window. The birth of children is celebrated with a mixture of joy and apprehension. Parents know that the little human being will have to grow up learning to sleep against the sky. Maternities offer permanently darkened rooms, and the first toys are almost always unlit flashlights or little books about the moon, as if she were a magical character from a distant tale. If you feel like you're already immersed in this reality, share in the comments what impacted you most. Maybe you too are searching for your night in a world that demands light all the time. Some young people dream of moving to places where the sky gets dark. They research southern cities, plan trips to witness the sunset. Many can't resist the urge to see with their own eyes what they've only seen in movies, a red sky giving way to the deep blue of night. Others, however, choose to stay and turn that eternal sun into creative force. And so life goes on in the place where the sun never sets. A silent struggle for shadow, an attempt to tame time with curtains and rituals. Each resident finds their own way to deal with the light. Some ignore it, others confront it, and some turn it into art. But all, without exception, carry the hope that one day, even if just for a moment, the sky will allow itself to rest. The city does not sleep, but it doesn't truly awaken either. It lives in an in-between state, as if breathing with more effort, and it is in that slow breath that stories happen. Stories like this, told by those who have learned to live even when the day refuses to end. If you want to keep following stories that show what life is like in places where reality defies logic, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The journey is just beginning. Some residents have developed a kind of sixth sense to distinguish moments of the day, even when the light outside remains unchanged. It's no longer about knowing whether it's 3 or 5 o'clock, but about perceiving the almost invisible changes in the hue of the brightness, the rhythm of the wind, or the behavior of birds. This trained gaze is like an internal compass, an instinct forged by repetition and by the need to maintain sanity in a place where the sky has forgotten how to change. Healthcare workers are the first to warn that uninterrupted light can wear down the soul. More than the hormonal effects, there's a silent hollowing of emotional perception. Everything feels constant, and that constancy numbs. People cry without knowing why. Others laugh loudly but can't remember the reason 2 minutes later. Feelings no longer have a specific time to be born, grow, and rest. They just pulse, alternating like blinking lights in a room that never darkens. There's a growing wave of art that seeks to simulate absence. A local filmmaker started recording entire movies with a black screen, where only the sound of actors in dark settings can be heard. The viewer sees nothing, only listens. And many leave the theater crying, touched by an experience they can't explain. It's not the story. It's the visual silence. It's the relief of not seeing for a few minutes. Because in this place, even the absence of image becomes a form of emotional presence. Children are taught to play with artificial shadows. Projectors create nighttime environments inside classrooms. Stories are told as if the moon were listening. And even though they've never seen a truly dark sky, they learn to imagine. Some teachers say that imagination has become the only possible refuge to preserve humanity's cycle. Because where there is no night, dreaming must be a taught act. Agriculture also had to reinvent itself. Constantly heated soil alters the cycle of crops. Some crops no longer exist, while others grow too quickly. Reverse greenhouses were created to simulate night in the roots of plants, forcing biological rest. Farmers no longer talk about seasons, but about resistances. Each harvest is a duel between what grows too fast and what refuses to sprout due to internal confusion. Animals perceive the change differently. Some birds no longer migrate, confused by the lack of signals. Dogs howl at a sky that never sleeps. Cats reverse their cycles, becoming restless during what should be night. Nocturnal animals have simply disappeared from the region or adapted to live hidden, as if ashamed to exist. Some say nature is trying to protest, but no one is listening. People's faith has changed. Churches began to hold services in total darkness. Prayers are whispered, not out of fear, but out of desire. The desire to feel that mystery still exists, that some things remain hidden. Because excess light doesn't reveal everything, it only displays what time hasn't yet managed to hide. Some religious people describe God as shadow, others as silence. And so, even with the sky always open, some choose to close their eyes to find something beyond. If you've ever felt the urge to hide from the day itself, then maybe you understand what's happening here. It's not about fleeing from light, but about rediscovering an internal space where the soul can rest. Clarity, when imposed without limits, stops being an ally. It starts to watch, to demand, to charge constant presence. And no one was made to always be available, not even to the light of the world. Young people deal with this reality in a hybrid way. Some try to adapt by creating internal cycles with technology. They wear dark glasses with timers, use apps that shut down all screens after a certain hour, and headphones with sounds that simulate the night. Others rebel. They paint their faces black, write poetry about darkness, and create music with slow beats and deep notes. It's a generation that doesn't just fight for identity, but for shadow. The night mask market exploded. Masks that not only block out light, but also release soft scents, play lullabies, and gently press facial points as if they were motherly hands. It's the market selling something the sky refuses to offer, the feeling that, at least for a few hours, we can disappear in peace. And that, more than a luxury, has become a physiological necessity. Local politics had to adapt to this unusual scenario. Lawmakers vote on bills in darkened chambers. Parliament installed a sensory reconfiguration room where public servants enter for 20 minutes before any major decision. Science has already proven it. Under constant light, emotions become disorganized. And a country where no one rests becomes too. A country where judgment becomes unbalanced. Prisons had to be restructured. Not out of pity, but out of necessity. Inmates who had no access to darkness showed signs of psychosis in under 2 months. It was necessary to implement forced shadow shifts, to simulate night even for the condemned. Because justice's punishment cannot be crueler than the limits of biology. Darkness became a human right, and recognizing that was one of the greatest civil advancements in the region. Family relationships began to require more patience. Exhausted parents try to impose bedtime rules, but are constantly challenged by children who say they're not sleepy. And they really aren't, because the brain, faced with eternal light, doesn't release the hormone needed to slow down. It's a domestic war no one chose, but that everyone must fight. Fatigue accumulates, and loving takes even more effort. There are reports of isolated communities within the city itself, formed by people who live exclusively in darkness. Completely closed houses, lit only by candles. They don't go out during the day. They don't mix. They created a subculture, where the absence of light became resistance, almost a religion. They don't talk much to those who live outside. But when someone disappears from exhaustion, that's where people go to seek shelter. Old churches maintain sundials in their gardens, now irrelevant. But no one removes them. It's like a monument to lost time. A reminder that, at some point in the past, people lived according to what the sky dictated. Today, it's the sky that ignores the rhythms of the earth. And so, an object that once guided entire lives has become nothing more than nostalgic decoration. Universities offer courses on circadian adaptation. They study ways to train the body to recognize moments of the day without relying on light. There are specific disciplines on the psychology of prolonged brightness. And even with so many studies, no answer is definitive. Because what's at stake isn't just science, it's how the human being relates to the invisible. If this story has already stirred your ideas about time, imagine living it every day. Leave a comment saying what you would do not to lose your sense of reality in a place like this. Your perspective could help other people think about life with new eyes, or with eyes that are also seeking the bit of shade. Dreams have become more intense. There are reports of people waking up crying after dreaming of the night. A simple landscape with a moon is enough to trigger deep emotions. Absence created a new kind of desire, the desire to see darkness like someone who reunites with a missing relative. And in that dreamlike encounter, many discover they were more tired than they realized. Schools teach about the night as if teaching about extinct animals. There are illustrated books with scenes of candlelit dinners, starry skies, nighttime walks. And children read them as if they were fiction. Some even doubt the existence of darkness. Others draw the moon with childlike strokes, full of question marks. Because when the world always shows the same side, the other side becomes legend. Technology has developed an entire field dedicated to brightness management. Automated homes create simulated light and shadow cycles. Screens that mimic twilight. Alarms that play cricket sounds to signal the end of the day. These are technological attempts to restore a biological order that nature has suspended. But no matter how sophisticated the devices are, there's still something they can't recreate: the feeling that time is passing. If you feel like time has slipped out of your control, know that you are not alone. Often, modern life traps us in brightness we didn't choose. We may not live where the sun never sets, but on some level, we've all forgotten what it's like to turn everything off and just exist in the dark. Time here is something else. It doesn't run, it drips. Each second seems to stretch, but when you look back, weeks have already passed. This constant contradiction between slowness and acceleration fragments the mind. It's like living in slow motion inside a high-speed train. Everything around shines, but inside, people desperately try to press the pause button. The external landscape is always beautiful. Clear skies, sunlit mountains, lakes that reflect the light like liquid mirrors. But there is a kind of beauty that tires, that dazzles, that suffocates. It's the paradox of being surrounded by brightness and yet feeling emotionally dimmed. And that paradox is what makes this life so unique and so hard to explain. The transportation system began operating with internal visual codes instead of fixed schedules. Trains and buses display colored bands that signal the symbolic moment of the day, such as wake-up time, rest hour, or recovery cycle. People began to identify these markers more by their tones than by numbers. The hands spin like anywhere else in the world, but there, emotional markers are what tell you when to board or disembark, when to speed up or slow your breathing. At the bakeries, the morning batch might come out at what the clock says is 11 p.m., and no one finds it strange. Hunger follows a different rhythm, guided by bodies that reject traditional time. Business owners stop thinking about maximum profit and begin planning around the survival of the collective rhythm. Open when the city asks. Close when the collective fatigue silences the streets. It's the market adapting to the psyche of a fuya. People tired of pretending they still live within traditional time. Funerals began to be held in unlit ceremonies. There are no illuminated wakes. Families choose dark environments, almost secret rituals, as if the final tribute required a space that resembled the absent night. Grief, when not honored with shadow, turns into anguish. And it was the residents themselves who asked, "Let us cry in the dark." Because there are sorrows that only find rest when the light doesn't invade. Funeral architecture changed. Covered cemeteries, tombs and underground galleries, spaces with minimal and natural lighting, coming from precisely calculated openings. The goal is not to hide death, but to allow it to exist outside the sun's gaze. Because even the dead there seem to need a rest that the living do not have. And visitors enter those spaces as if stepping into another world, not out of fear, but out of respect for the cycle that was broken outside. Fashion began to reflect this collective feeling of light saturation. Clothes gained dark tones, matte textures, layers that create shadow over the body. Local designers started producing pieces with sensors that darken on touch, as if wanting to give the skin a chance to fade a little in front of the world. Dressing became a form of hiding, even when walking in broad daylight. And by doing so, many found a certain relief, the feeling that not everything about them needed to be seen all the time. Children started playing in dark rooms by their own choice. They build castles with curtains, pretend they're in caves, invent games where the main rule is don't turn on the light. Psychologists say it's how they found a way to rebalance the inner world with the external reality. It's not fear, it's reinvention. Because when the environment doesn't offer night, childhood learns to create it with blankets, pillows, and imagination. If you have children and have already noticed in them the desire to stay in the dark, maybe you understand what these families face daily. Darkness in the right measure is comfort, protection, a lap. To deny it completely is like forcing the heart to always beat in alert mode. Comment below if you've ever felt that in your own routine, that exhaustion of always being visible, always awakened, always under some form of light. Nighttime tourism became a form of resistance. Specialized guides lead small groups through trails in completely dark environments, natural caves, tunnels from old trains, adapted abandoned areas. No flashlights are allowed. The purpose is to feel. Feel the cold of shadow, the sound without image, the smell without visual distraction. And at the end of the path, there are almost always tears. Not of fear, but of reunion with something. Everyone carries the memory of absence that allows one to breathe. Schools introduced the nothing hour, a period when lights are turned off, sounds are silenced, and no one can speak. Students sit on the floor in silence and simply exist. At first, many resist, but over time, they learn that this space without instruction is a kind of emotional night. A chance to relearn what it means to stop without guilt, without urgency, without light. And some say it's the most anticipated class of the week, local. Cuisine began to value the dark taste. Dishes that evoke rest, with soft textures, dense aromas, and muted colors. Warm soups, calming drinks, desserts that resemble silence. Chefs discovered that cooking can be a way to provoke what the sky does not deliver. And in those flavors, people rediscover the gesture of slowing down. Food stops being just sustenance. It becomes refuge that the entertainment industry had to reinvent. Itself, locally produced series and films began to use minimal lighting, with scenes set in constant dimness. The audience not only accepts, it desires it. There is psychological relief in consuming stories where the light retreats. Because there, even if fictional, there is space for exhaustion to rest. And directors understood that sometimes what moves the most is not what is shown, but what is hidden. Human relationships became quieter. Conversations lowered in volume. Meetings happen under dim light. Touch regained importance. People hug longer. They hold hands in silence. The excess of clarity silenced words but reignited gestures. Because when everything is always visible, what truly matters becomes what can only be felt in the dark. Hope still exists, but it doesn't shine like before. Now it pulses like a forgotten flashlight at the bottom of a drawer. Faint but persistent. People don't speak much about it, but they carry in their pockets a plan of escape, an image of the night, a whispered prayer. Hope, there, became resistance. And to resist, in this place, is an act of self-love disguised as routine. Some scientists study the possibility of creating a collective artificial night, a system that would darken the entire city for a few hours each day. But the idea faces resistance. Some are afraid of darkness. afraid that when it comes, it might reveal more than desired. Because light also hides. It hides what no one wants to see inside themselves. And so, the project remains shelved. If you've ever been afraid of the dark, perhaps you understand that the problem is not the absence of light, but what might appear when it goes away. And perhaps for that very reason, it is so difficult for this city to accept the arrival of night. Because even if desired, it carries truths that constant brightness keeps asleep. Public art became a field of dialogue between light and shadow. Sculptures that disappear at noon. Murals that can only be seen with special glasses that simulate low luminosity. These are attempts to show that, even in excess, absence can still be suggested. And these works spark intense discussions. Not about beauty, but about fatigue. About the exhaustion of seeing everything all the time. Literature gained new genres. Poems that must be read with eyes closed, narratives built in the dark, books with black pages and embossed letters. The reader is forced to touch, to feel, to imagine. Reading became a nighttime experience, even during the day. And in that gesture, the word became a shelter again. Because darkness, when well used, reveals more than light. The few natural spaces still untouched are protected as shadow sanctuaries. Caves, dense forests, deep gorges, entry is limited. Access is controlled, and those who manage to visit leave transformed. It's not just tourism, it's pilgrimage. Because in a world that refuses to turn off, finding breaches of shadow has become a miracle. Spirituality gained new contours. Prayers stopped asking for light. They ask for silence, forgetfulness, retreat. People no longer seek answers, they seek rest. Some pray to the night as if it were an entity. Not to ask for things, but to give thanks for any shadow, even if brief. And in that kind of faith lies an ancient wisdom. There are blessings that only Bloom and Absence. Universities offer scholarships for studies on human behavior under extreme brightness. The results indicate increased impulsiveness, decreased empathy, emotional hyperconnectivity. But the most alarming data is this: the more light, the harder it is for people to reconnect with themselves. And perhaps that is the greatest drama of all. If you've ever felt disconnected from yourself, you know how hard it is to reconnect in a noisy, dazzling world. Imagine then living in a place where the sky itself refuses to blink. Comment if this makes you reflect on your own pace. Maybe your night also needs to return. Marine animals adapted their cycles based on the tides. But even the most resilient showed changes in migratory patterns. Some scientists suggest that the imbalance in human behavior is also affecting the surrounding ecosystem, not through pollution, but through vibration. The absence of night creates an invisible chain of tension that spreads silently, like ripples from a stone thrown into an eternal lake. Loneliness intensified. Even among neighbors, there is emotional distance. People no longer know when to visit, when to call, when to talk. Because when time is a straight line of light, everything feels either too early or too late, so they postpone. They delay. They fall silent. Light, with its constant presence, erased the gatherings without anyone noticing. Crime decreased. Not because of surveillance, but due to exhaustion. Violent impulses weakened under luminous boredom. Robberies became rare. But other dangers emerged: emotional collapse, extreme apathy, disinterest in life itself. It's no longer about living or dying, but about simply continuing to exist. And that, many times, is more cruel than any sentence. Older people try to keep alive the memory of the night as emotional heritage. They tell stories of when the sky darkened, when stars were visible, when children fell asleep to the sound of the wind. It's not nostalgia, it's cultural resistance. And every word told is an attempt to remember that once time knew how to rest. And even with all of this, there are those who choose to stay, who look at the eternal sun and say, "I'll build my life here." They are the resilient ones. Molded by light, those who learn to pretend everything is fine, and perhaps, because of that, deserve to be seen with more compassion. Because staying where everything invites escape is a kind of courage few understand. Silence came to be valued as a form of rebellion. In an environment where everything is bright, where everything is exposed, where even thoughts seem more visible, staying silent became a way to preserve what is still intimate. There are cafes where no one speaks. They simply sit, drink, and look ahead. There is no music, no distraction. There, silence is offered as a service. And the patrons know, what is consumed is not the coffee, it is the right not to be invaded. Schools began to include in their curriculum a subject called inner rhythm. In it, students are taught to listen to their own bodies, to identify signs of fatigue, to name alert states and periods of apathy. They learn that the external world is not always reliable, that sometimes the sky lies. And in this quiet learning, children grow up with a wisdom adults lack, that living well is not doing too much, but knowing when to stop. In the industrial zone, workers rotate in silent shifts. The machines no longer make the same noises. Everything has been muffled by acoustic structures, not to hide production, but to protect the mind. Some workers wear simulated reality goggles to recreate functional darkness while operating equipment. And they say that in those brief intervals, the brain breathes. Productivity increased. Not through pressure, but through disguised pauses. In maternity wards, there are rooms without windows. Newborn babies are placed in cribs with controlled lighting, simulating day and night cycles. Doctors state that this is vital for neurological development. But there is something more. It's a way to give children a chance to start from zero with balance, even if the world outside ignores this rhythm. And when parents enter this darkened environment for the first time, they almost always cry. Not for the child, but for themselves, who no longer remember what true darkness feels like. Prisons had to invent a new form of punishment, the absence of stimulus. Because taking away freedom in a place with no night is already punishment enough. Many inmates report no longer dreaming. They sleep with their eyes open, lose track of weeks. The cell stopped being a physical prison, it became a prison of perception. And prison guards began receiving training to care for mental health. With more urgency than for security. Medicine developed specific treatments for what they call chronic brightness syndrome, a state where the body refuses to rest, even with medication. The heart races for no reason, breathing becomes shallow. The mind refuses to quiet down. It's not insomnia, it's hyper-awareness. Doctors say that eternal light robs the brain of its right to shut down. And over time, that takes too high a toll. If you've ever laid in bed and felt your thoughts spinning as if they didn't want to shut off, then you know a small fraction of what this reality is. Imagine that every day. Imagine your body begging for rest while the sky refuses to allow it. Comment if you've ever experienced something like this. Your story may help others realize this affliction is more common than they think. Romances have slowed down. People meet but don't rush. Dates happen under low lighting, with sealed windows. Kisses are whispered. Hands touch more than eyes meet. It's as if love needs shadow to grow. Many couples avoid declaring love in full light, not out of shame, but out of respect. Because loving requires retreat, and retreating under a sky that never sleeps is almost a revolutionary act. Children's literature was rewritten. Fairy tales now have scenes in the dark. Stories where the night protects, where the wolf sleeps, where stars guide. Authors understood they can't raise a generation to believe darkness is the enemy. Because the fear of night there is also the fear of self. And if a child grows up without learning to embrace silence, they become an adult who only knows how to run, without knowing from what. Calendars stopped using colors to differentiate workdays and holidays. Now the marker is emotional. There are bright weeks, dense weeks, saturated weeks. Companies began allowing time off based on this type of identification. It's no longer about dates. It's about health. Because no one can operate in a straight line all the time. And when an entire city learns that, a new way of living is born. Weather forecasts lost relevance. The weather doesn't change. It rains little. There are no dense clouds. The climate seems static. But instead of generating comfort, it brings anguish, because the unchanging sky reminds the mind that time is trapped, and what should be stability becomes prison. That's why people stopped watching weather forecasts. They prefer to listen to songs that simulate thunderstorms. It's the soul begging for movement, even if it's invented. Silent suicides increased. Not the violent acts, but the invisible ones. People who stop trying, who keep getting up, getting dressed, walking the streets, but inside, they've already given up. Doctors call it functional disconnection. Neighbors say it's exhaustion. Religious people say it's the absence of mystery. And perhaps they're all right. Because living without darkness is living without pause. And without pause, hope evaporates. Sports were adapted. No more races in open fields. Players train in covered environments. Athletes began showing visual fatigue. Constant light affected performance, focus, muscle recovery. So the city's Olympic Committee decided all official competitions must include dark cycles. Victory there also means respecting the limits of shadow. If you've ever forced yourself to keep going when everything in you asked for a break, then maybe you understand what it's like to survive in this place. The whole city operates like that, pretending everything's fine while the body screams inside for a truce that never comes. Comment if this has ever been part of your life, and if today, you've managed to find your own night. The pharmaceutical industry profits like never before. But at the same time, a movement for silent healing is growing. Retreats in dark environments. Light fasting, blindfolded walks in forests. People want less stimulus, less glare, less euphoria. They no longer want more energy. They want permission to stop. And in that quiet desire, society begins to understand that the future may not be speed, but silence. Collective spirituality began to adapt to the rhythm of lack. Religious festivals are held under veils, in temples of filtered light. Faith is no longer a spectacle. It has become an intimate gesture, a restrained word, an inward gaze. Pastors, monks, and guides say that external light no longer represents truth. And many followers finally understood that true enlightenment has nothing to do with what enters through the eyes. Museums created dark rooms where visitors are guided by headphones. Nothing is seen, but everything is heard. These are real. Stories told in the dark about loss, discovery, overcoming. And at the end of the experience, most come out with tearful eyes. Because what moves isn't what was said. It's what was felt when the eyes were forced to close. The museum became a confessional. Art became comfort. The most visited stores don't sell objects. They sell silence. Soundproof rooms, booths where one can be alone for 15 minutes. There are lines. There are reservations. People pay to disappear for a moment. And no one laughs about it. Because disappearing there is a form of self-recovery. It's like telling the world, I also deserve rest, even with the sky awake. Popular cuisine created a new symbolic dish, the invisible dinner. Served in total darkness with neutral dishes and soft textures, the goal is not to satisfy the stomach, but the spirit. Eating without seeing, chewing without haste. Remembering that the body is more than a machine, it's a temple. And this dish, more than a trend, became a ritual. Those who partake say they feel time slow down inside their mouths. Adult education now includes unlearning workshops. Activities that teach how to stop, how to sleep, how to breathe. It sounds absurd, but many residents forgot. They live in a continuous state of alertness. And these workshops are the new beginning. In them, the most important part is not the content. It's the silence between the content. That's where Healing Lives. Politics began discussing the installation of public shadow domes. Giant structures that, for a few hours a day, would darken light in plazas and urban centers. The proposal divides opinions. Some call it regression. Others call it revolution. But all agree on one thing: the city needs darkness, even if in homeopathic doses. If you've made it this far, perhaps you've realized that this isn't just a story about an unusual place. It's about all of us. About the urgency of relearning, how to pause, of respecting our limits, of understanding that light, when constant, can also blind. Comment what moved you most so far. Your perception is part of this collective healing process. Universities created simulated night laboratories. Students stay inside for days, simply feeling the effects of visual rest. The results are extraordinary. Increased empathy, improved sleep, emotional clarity. The paradox is cruel. It was necessary to artificially create what nature once gave freely. And now we pay to relearn what we already knew. Advertising had to reinvent itself. Darker images, slower messages, softer sounds. The public rejects exaggeration, prefers whispers over shouts. Because consumption has also changed. People no longer want to be convinced. They want to be respected in their exhaustion. And those who don't understand that disappear from the market. Elderly people form groups that meet in dark places to tell stories of darkness. They are the last generation who still saw stars, who still got lost in the night, who still feared real darkness. And each story told is a candle lit in the memory of those who don't want to forget what it means to truly sleep. And finally, there are those who say that one day, the sky will tire of shining. That, out of mercy or accident, the night will return, and when that happens, people won't scream in fear. They will lie down on the ground, close their eyes, and finally breathe in peace. Even today, every day, people awaken not because they want to, but because the sky never slept. It's an awakening without opposition, without contrast, without resistance. The body gets up not from rest, but from habit. And in this automatic gesture, the city continues its strange routine, its fractured rhythm, its way of continuing to exist without ever knowing whether it's time to restart or to stop. The relentless brightness makes life seem like it never pauses. But the truth is that without pause, life silently drains away. The more sensitive ones began to measure time not by clocks, but by the pauses of the heart. When they feel their soul retract, their body sink a little deeper into the chair, their eyes start to burn even without sleep, they understand it's time to hide from the light. They created inner huts, mental hideouts, emotional corners where no brightness enters. These are secret strategies, not found in manuals, but they keep these people alive, or at least whole. What was most lost in this place wasn't the night, nor the stars, nor the dreams. It was emotional time, that instinctive perception that says, now is the time to love, to cry, to be silent, to wait. The constant light dissolved these boundaries. Now everything seems allowed all the time. And when everything is possible, nothing really happens. The soul no longer finds the exact moment to bloom. And when it blooms, it feels ashamed because it doesn't know if it's day or if it should wait for the darkness. Relationships are increasingly shorter. Not because of lack of feeling, but because of excess fatigue. Maintaining a bond requires listening, silence, waiting, and all of that needs the night. Without it, the other becomes too much light, too much presence, too much demand. It's like living in front of a mirror that never turns off. And many give up not from lack of love, but from not knowing how to live next to someone without the light revealing every imperfection. Schools try to teach poetry, but encounter difficulty. The verses seem less powerful in environments where everything is bright. Metaphors lose strength. Suggestion fades. Language becomes literal, and students, conditioned to the light, have difficulty imagining. Because imagination is born from shadow, from the unspoken, from the space between words. And when even the words are too exposed, imagination flees, like a nocturnal animal scared by headlights. In hospitals, patients with invisible illnesses multiply. Pains without cause, exhaustion without reason, sadness without a name. Tests reveal nothing, but the body cries for help. Doctors are beginning to understand that these people don't just need medicine. They need a place where they can fade without guilt, where silence is medicinal, where shadow isn't seen as abandonment, but as care. If you've ever felt exhausted even after sleeping, then you may understand what these patients go through. It's not physical rest. It's soul exhaustion from being called into the light. So often from always being available, awake, exposed. Comment if you've lived through this kind of fatigue. Your experience may give a name to what many still can't explain. Local music began using longer chords, lower notes, slower rhythms. Artists understood that no one can take the rush of sound anymore. The whole city breathes in a rhythm of lament. And even so, there is beauty, a painful underground beauty, but real. Because even in tiredness there's art. And sometimes, it's precisely from fatigue that the song that cradles, consoles, understands is born. Science tries to help. But even the best studies reach the same conclusion. The human being was not made to live under an eternal sun. Biological rhythms, hormonal cycles, emotional processing, all demand shadow. And no matter how many substitutes are created, it will never be the same. Nature knew what it was doing when it created the night. And now, its absence teaches us just how wise it was. Children grow up without fear of the dark. But that's not a virtue. It's absence. They grow up without knowing what it's like to hide under a blanket, to look out the window and see nothing, to imagine monsters or stars. And with that, they lose not only fears, but also courage. Because it's in the symbolic confrontation of the night that personality is formed. And without it, everything is flat, visible, equal. Architecture became more introspective. Houses have shadowy spaces, corridors without direct lighting, rooms where daylight doesn't enter. It's a return to the womb, the cave, the beginning. Architects say they're trying to give back to life what the sky stole. And the residents are grateful. Because in those spaces, the heart rests, the mind quiets. The soul listens to its own noises again. Some say the entire city is sick. That the excess of light caused a kind of collective fever, a social hallucination in which everyone pretends everything is fine while they crumble inside. But maybe it's not illness. Maybe it's adaptation. Maybe living there is an extreme lesson about human limits. And perhaps for that very reason, these people deserve more respect than pity. Some families manage to create such a well-structured shadow cycle that their homes operate in complete contrast to the sky. Inside, children sleep on time, adults retreat to talk without light, couples meet under weak lamps. Outside, the day screams. Inside, time whispers. And in these silent homes, perhaps lies the last hope to rebalance everything. If you've ever created routines that go against the rhythm of the world around you, you know how hard it is. But you also know how much it can save. Share in the comments if you have any personal ritual that helps you pause, breathe, hide from the light. Your habit might inspire others who also need shade. There are poets who began writing with invisible ink. Their texts only appear under blacklight. It's an aesthetic protest against exposure. An attempt to remind that not everything needs to be seen to be real. These books became rare, almost mystical. And those who read them feel like they've touched a secret. Because that's what the dark does. It restores the value of mystery. The elders say the city lost its shame. that now everything is always on display, that mistakes, excesses, pain, desires, everything is exposed by the continuous light, and because of that, people hardened. They learn to look fine, to stage stability, but deep down they live, trying to remember what it was like when one could fail without an audience. When the night hid what the day wouldn't forgive, the nearby sea seems calmer. They say it too, that tired of reflecting so much light. Fishermen complain that fish changed behavior, that now they swim in deeper waters, as if seeking darkness, as if even there, the brightness had invaded too much. And those who watch the sea at dusk notice, it shines, yes, but it's a shine of surrender. The trade of objects that imitate the night became one of the most profitable. Perfumes that smell like night forest, clothes that muffle sound, rugs that warm like a body, all made to fool the senses, to remind the brain that night still exists, even if in the form of a product. It's the industry trying to supply what nature no longer delivers. People began to look at the sky less, not from lack of faith, but from saturation. They learned to trust their own instincts more than the colors of the horizon, and with that, spirituality turned inward. It's no longer about what's above, it's about what's deep, deep in the chest, deep in thought, deep in the soul. If you still look to the sky seeking answers, don't lose that courage, but also learn to listen to the silence within you. Because sometimes what you need isn't above, it's hidden in the darkness you're afraid to visit. Folk dances were slowed down. Movements gained pauses, gestures became wider. Feet touched the ground as if asking permission to stay. It's a dance that doesn't celebrate, it remembers. It remembers how it was when the body followed time and not the other way around. And dancing, there became physical memory. Libraries created rooms without lighting. Braille books, reading, guided by sound. Reading stopped being visual. It became sensory. It's a way to train listening, touch, presence. Because knowledge also gets lost when everything is light. And in these darkened spaces, readers discover what the mind can do when it's not distracted by images. The night became a symbol of struggle, no longer something to fear, but something to reclaim. Social movements carry unlit lanterns as flags. It's their way of saying, we want the right to stop, to not see, to not be seen. And in these silent protests, pulses a revolution. That doesn't shout, it just switches off. Death in this place no longer scares. Many began to see it as a return, as the moment when finally the eyes close without guilt. Some say they will only truly rest when they die. Others say that in death, they will find the lost night again. And this, far from being morbid, is a declaration of desire, a legitimate request for an end. The children growing up now may never know real night. But even so, they will seek it, in stories, in embraces, in dark rooms, because the body knows what it needs, even when the world denies it. And this silent knowing might be the seed of return. And if one day, for some reason, the night returns, no one will throw a party. People will simply lie down, close their eyes, and allow the world finally to breathe without haste, without fear, without light. If this story touched you, share it. Leave a comment, say what you felt if you saw something of your own life here. And if this narrative awakened in you the desire to pause, to breathe, to respect the silence, then you already know. This is your place. This is the channel What Life is Like. Here, every story is a mirror, and every silence, a revelation.